Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us tonight. Welcome to our Colledge talk. Do you see what I see? A closer look at the UC application, which is part of our college admissions literacy series, a series dedicated to bringing students and family better information about higher education and better access to college admissions. My name is Sarah Kolosky, and I'm one of the application specialists here at Colledge. We are thrilled to have so many of your students and parents joining us tonight. Our goal for each and every one of you is to walk away with a better understanding of UC admissions, empower you with the tools and information you need to successfully and smoothly complete your UC app. We have a great speaker lined up tonight to bring you a wealth of information. But before we get started, just want to go over a couple notes. This session is going to be recorded and will be sent out to all attendees. We do encourage you to be present during the live session, as we will have some open Q&A at the end and gives you an opportunity to get some insight directly from professionals. Anyone who is watching on our live stream on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, I'm going to drop the Eventbrite link into the chat box now. So please feel free to take a second and fill out the form to get your copy later on. Our goal here is to reach as many members in the community as possible with giving them relevant college decision-making process information. So please feel free to send us a comment in the chat box if you're finding this useful. And if you are liking this and streaming it on YouTube, please feel free to hit that like button for us as well. I will keep track of your questions and facilitate Q&A at the end of tonight's event. We will definitely have time for questions, so I want you to encourage to ask anything that's on your mind. There are no good or bad questions that can't be answered here, so please feel free to take advantage of these resources. So we're going to get started to kind of go overview with some general mistakes that we do see when students are submitting the application. I've kind of outlined about 5 top ones that really do help, kind of make the process a little bit easier. The UC application is a beast, so we want to make sure that we kind of cover all our bases here. So the first is inaccurate course entry. This is very important since the transcripts typically make up 50% of admissions decisions. Every school is going to submit their course selection process to the UC, so it's important that you're paying attention and transcribing courses exactly as they appear on your transcript and triple check them. The next one would be any unshared activities and awards. This is where students may forget that there are certain awards or activities they may not necessarily think that would qualify that as an academic or an extracurricular activity, but we want to see the whole you. So we want to see what you're doing in anything outside of that academic setting, whether it is being a babysitter or a paid work or caretaker for an elder relative. Those are all things that do count in that space. So we want to make sure that you're filling it. You have 20 spaces and about 350 characters to really explain what you're doing on kind of the week-to-week basis. And again, showing your full self. This is the time to shine and kind of humbly brag about yourself. So take advantage of putting as much as you can to show them that picture. Next, it's grammar and spelling errors, which it seems pretty straightforward, but with how intensive the UC application can be, it is important to take that time to really look at your spelling, look at grammar, look at capitalization. All of that is going to matter when it is reviewed by the UC system. Procrastinating on your personal insight questions. They're also known as PIQs. You are given 8 different essay topics to choose from, and of which you have to select 4. It's a maximum word count of 350. So they're small but mighty. So they're really intentional about making sure that they get some qualitative information in these PIQs. You don't want to be stressing out and waiting until the last minute to submit and writing these. It takes a lot of time to go over, have some insight, get some editing, and make sure that you're kind of showing your best work. We want to see how much time you are taking into it. It is something that does take a long time. So make sure that you allow that management so you're not waiting till the last minute. And finally, kind of in conjunction with that, it's waiting until November 30th to submit. There's some new updates that I'll be sharing that will help kind of facilitate that process, so you're not waiting until the last minute to submit. There's oftentimes there can be some technical glitches, or if there's not all the documentation that's submitted on behalf of your application, you want to make sure you allow as much much time as possible. The application has gone down the last several years running, and last year it started going down on November 28th. So we all know bandwidth issues can be an issue on either side, so give yourself a little bit of a grace period and not waiting until the last minute. So now, to dive into the application a little bit more deeply, I'm happy to introduce Tina Nguyen, who comes to us with many years of application reading experience as a previous admissions officer at USC and an external reader for UCSD. So, Tina, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone, again. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Tina Nguyen, and I am an admissions advisor with Colledge. And I'm really excited to be present with all of you today with my colleague Sarah to talk to you about the UC application. It's really, again, to share the space with you, especially as we move through high peak admission, to come together tonight to share information for the UC application. We'll soon be approaching next month. And so again, you want to make sure to get started early, as Sarah said. For any of you who don't know us just yet, Colledge is a team of experienced admissions professionals who work closely with students and their families anywhere on their path to higher education. Our work helps students identify and apply to best fit colleges and ignites their deeper potential. What you see here on this table is pretty exciting data showing a few of our student outcomes working with Colledge. As you'll see here noted, many students who work or have applied to Boston University who work with Colledge has an admit rate of roughly around 69%. Versus students who are applying, the admit rate for the school in general is only 19%. And so again, a huge difference there. Similarly, UC Berkeley's admit rate, who is my very own alma mater, so go Bears, is at 16%, while students working specifically with Colledge were admitted at a rate of 36%. But as often you'll hear from us, these numbers are really just a reflection of our focus for fit. And again, we call it the best right fit. By working with your child and taking the time to understand their interest, strengths, and goals for their future, we partner with our families to set up all of our students for a successful and rewarding college process, even if we couldn't promise that 36% admit rate to UC Berkeley to every student.
Sorry,
awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tina. That information's really helpful, and even just giving a kind of a surface overview of how selective that plan is for a lot of colleges. So really emphasizing fit, I think, is going to be really important takeaway from today. So before diving into the UC app, I want to invite each of you to join us for our next event. We have our junior year jumpstart, which will be held next month on Sunday, November 6th at 6 o'clock. This event is designed for students who want to use their time before senior year well, with Colledge in mind, and offering juniors as well as sophomores and freshmen great insights into some of the specifics of application review. So please make sure to come join us. You don't want to miss out. And I'm now going to post the link to register into our chat box. All right. So we're going to be spending most of our time together walking through the UC application, but we pause for updates about this particular UC application cycle first. So the first big kind of pertinent update is UC is going fully test-free for applicants this year and beyond. You might notice that the UC application will give you the opportunity to self-report your SAT and ACT scores on the application. However, they will not use these self-reported scores to make admissions decisions or award scholarships. In fact, if you don't fully believe me, the admissions readers can't actually even see your self-reported scores. Tina, I don't know if you've had this experience being an external reader for UCSD yet.
Just to chime in here, that is in fact true. On the admission side, we can't see the self-reported scores. And again, to emphasize, like Sarah mentioned, It's really used just for placement purposes, especially as you kind of navigate and move forward with the specific institutions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's some really great insight. So, if you've taken these exams and choose to report your score may be used for course placement after you enroll. But to emphasize, test scores will not be considered as part of an admissions decision or scholarship consideration. Next, as we're kind of seeing in just general trend, we're having applicant pools increase year over year, which is making the process a lot more selective. As you saw the numbers with Berkeley being about 16%, it's more critical to spend as much time on your application. So you're highlighting who you are as a strong candidate for a specific school and everything that you've done to continue in your 4 years and beyond. There's also many majors to choose from on each UC campus. So major impaction and selection is going to be very important too. You want to find something that you're most interested in, and keep in mind that the major you select when applying plays a role within the admission application process. So for example, in the past years, approximately 85% of applicants selected the top 12 majors when applying to UCI. So be sure to do your research and be aware of the majors that you're selecting. It's especially...
Oh, sorry, Sarah.
Oh, you're okay.
I was just going to mention, I mean, that's a great point that you make, especially with, students applying to only the top 12 majors, for example, for UCI, just because, again, as you know, there's a ton of different majors that are out there at many of these institutions. And so you really want to make sure that you're finding something that you're interested in, right? And of course, something that you would be passionate about and are interested in too with learning at your respective institutions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially with this type of application, it essentially becomes another class. So you want to make sure that you're preparing and allowing the time to do that research. So you're not worrying about having to make any changes or transferring later on. We want to make sure that this is the best fit at the start. One great thing is that our UC system is increasing in-state admission. So last year, UC campuses increased admission rates for in-state students by almost 2% and decreased admissions for out-of-state students by 20%. So this is really big. We want the UC system recognizes that they want to have more access for California residents and received over $80 million from the California legislature to help balance out that in-state and out-of-state enrollment. So that's really exciting. As much as it is becoming more selective, they're looking to have a little bit more sound balance in-state versus out-of-state students present. And to also help with the your timeline and being able to submit a little bit earlier. The UC application's always been open August 1st, but the unique thing this year is that you're going to be eligible to submit as early as October 1st. So you're not having to wait until the end of November to submit your application. So helping to minimize probably those bandwidth issues that have been happening every year, in addition to giving you that flexibility as well. Now, with that being said, you also want to make sure that your application is complete and still taking the same amount of time as you would if you were going to submit later on. So it's something to have in mind to not rush. And again, give yourself as much time to be intentional and have a quality application being submitted. And finally, we have a tuition stability program that's going into effect with the UC system. So its tuition and cost of attendance is averaging a 4.5% increase. So this tuition stability plan that's being piloted will allow students to keep the same tuition rate that they're going to start out with for 6 years. So it's helping families have more control over the cost of college education. A stable tuition plan that doesn't increase every year will give families that peace of mind and stay the same over a considerable amount of time. So giving you a little bit of a cushion there and helping plan better for the financial investment in the future of their students as well. So those are some big updates. You can Again, you're going to have these resources at the end, and the recording will be sent out to refer to. We also have some links here that will be useful in helping you guide through the nuances of the UC app itself, starting out just full on freshman application checklist, more information about the PIQs, and as well as some more specific stuff like the UC San Diego 7 colleges, financial aid, and just general tips again to kind of help you walk through the process. I would say, Tina, how much time do you think a student averages to really work through and complete a sound application? What's been your experience?
I think that's a great question. With the UC application, I think about 3 hours is typically appropriate for the UC application. Like we mentioned a couple of times, the UC application is certainly a beast. And so to the point Sarah made, with these helpful links and tools, I would certainly recommend making sure to utilize it, especially as you start to move forward with starting your application, because it is going to be very helpful for you if you move forward with that. I do want to mention though, with the 3 hours, that is really just focused on the application itself. So it doesn't really include like the PIQs that Sarah had talked about earlier, just because of course with the essays, being able to, of course, draft those takes also time to move forward into revisions and things like that as well. So that is certainly going to take more time. The 3 hours is solely just the application from start to finish without the essay piece, which of course we'll walk through a little bit later as well. And just to highlight, again, these links are going to be shared with you. So it's something that you can also have access to, especially as you move forward and starting with that.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So it's time consuming. Like I said, it's kind of another class that you have to think about in addition to your senior course load. So plan accordingly. And in addition to the links that we had, just kind of general overview of the UC, there are some UC campus webinars and info sessions and links to those excuse me, those events and information on for each individual campus. So we're providing those links. And while all UC campuses use the same factors to evaluate applications, they often apply factors differently. So be sure to review selection process by campus to make sure that you're presenting, again, in the best light possible. And now, Tina's going to dive into that checklist and walk through the application for us.
Awesome. So this is all great information, really, Sarah. But like mentioned, before we get started, I would really just want to highlight that we are not working for the University of California system. But this is really just a walkthrough of the application informed by our students with students. And it's something that we might for students as well. Something to note, we will not be talking about the transfer application, transfer student. Who is interested, I would certainly write us independently, because tonight's presentation will just be focusing specifically on the freshman application. Before you begin, there's a number of things that's really important for you to make sure to have handy, because there is, as mentioned, the application there is a lot of information on you. Accurately to navigate the academic section. I want to make sure to have an updated list of your on the extracurricular section. That is something that you really want to make sure to highlight you as a student, and everything that you've done from start to finish, whether that's clubs, organizations, taking care of your siblings, or being someone who has carpooled and worked with in your school to transport them to school. Really, anything that you've done.
Oh no, I think we just lost Tina. But while she's getting her technical issues situated, as we kind of can see, it can happen anywhere. So she's kind of going through and making sure you create a doc, have your essays ready to go. Again, adding a little bit extra time beyond maybe 3 hours if you're going to prepare those essays and those PIQs. Again, you want to make sure that they maintain quality over quantity and length. So, and Tina's back, but I'll see. How's your bandwidth? Good.
Okay,
Yeah, you're back.
awesome. We're back.
Yeah,
So
just
technological issues, of course, always comes up.
yeah.
So as I was saying, of course, there's a lot of things that you have to have handy, and essays is going to be one of them. And so going back to Sarah's question earlier, in the case you have your essays ready, the application would be about 3 hours. And so you want to make sure to, of course, have that as well. In addition to that, make sure you have your parents' information handy and also social security number. And so again, all these things are important with navigating the application. Uh, Awesome. So moving on now, like I mentioned, we're going to be walking through with the UC application. So we are going to be focusing on this, B7 application. And so as you navigate the application, I do want to mention, some of the common mistakes that Sarah had mentioned earlier. We'll make sure to touch base on those. And by the end of this presentation, we're really hoping that you feel confident in filling out the UC application on your own to submit before, of course, the end of November. Which again, you don't want to make sure to, submit. You want to make sure to submit way prior to then as well to give yourself some grace period. With that being said, the first step in regards to navigating the application would be to create an account with a login email and password that you'll need to access each and every single time. Something I want to mention here too is the UC application typically logs you out every 45 minutes or so. So what is really critical for you to make sure to do is that you are continuing to save your work so that way you're not losing any of that information as well. As you log into the application, and once you've created your application, which in my case I have, you'll notice that there are different sections within the application. There's 7 different sections here. As you see, there's about you, which again is centered on yourself, your personal information. You'll also be able to choose your campuses and majors. So the various, campuses that you might be looking into, as well as major selection, going back to what Sarah had mentioned earlier. You want to choose something that is really relevant for you. And most campuses, or all campuses now actually, do allow you to select a first choice major as well as an alternate major. Berkeley, which is new this year, now allows you to select an alternative major as well. In addition to that, you'll see academic history, which is where you'll be able to input all of your courses and grades. And this is going to be the portion that you're really utilizing your transcript specifically. So it's important to have that handy. Test scores, again, as Sarah mentioned with test scores, it's not something that you are required to do because it is test optional. However, this is going to be more focused in regards to placement processes versus something that admissions can see specifically. And the next section is activities and awards. And so this is where you'll be able to really shine through as a student, tell them everything that you've done. And then with the 2 last parts, scholarships and programs, that's an opportunity for you to select different, types of scholarships that might be applicable to you. So you'll want to make sure to go through that list, and personal insight is going to be focused on the questions and the essays as mentioned. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. We'll walk through the first couple sections pretty quickly, but if you take a look here in About You, as I mentioned, as we scroll through, you'll see that it's most of your personal information, right? Address, name. You'll also have information regarding your parents and also their occupation and things like that. So pretty standard information. And so it's just information that you'll need to gather to have prepared for this application. Moving on to the next section. So campuses and majors. Here, as mentioned, you'll be able to choose the specific campuses that you might be interested in applying to. And so again, we really want to emphasize and drive through that you should be doing your research. Don't select and apply to a campus or major that you would not see yourself being happy with. Since again, this is going to be your next chapter of 4 years at your respective colleges. And so again, you want to really make sure that you're taking some time to reflect on yourself and as well as your interest. I do want to mention also as an option for majors, as we take a look at the major section, and you'll notice that again, there's a major on the left-hand side and also an alternate major that you're able to choose. So with the alternate major specifically, keep in mind in the case you really don't know what major you might want to be or are really considering maybe a couple, there are choices for you to select undeclared as well. And again, that is perfectly okay. Many students do apply as undeclared. But again, as mentioned, you really just want to make sure that you are thinking through of your interests and, of course, making sure to choose something that is most interesting for you as well. Something to note is, in the case you do need help with navigating majors, we do recommend that you all reach out to Colledge, and we're more than happy to help you and walk you through this process as well, especially since, again, major impaction can be something that's considered through the process. So as we continue scrolling, you'll be able to see the different rankings. And something to note here is, again, with the rankings, you'll notice there was a link that you could reference as well. That could be helpful, especially as you navigate, of course, the process with some of these colleges. Moving on to the next section. Academic history is really where you want to make sure to spend and really focus on the consistency and accuracy, simply because with the UC application, it is very important that you work through the application chronologically, because some of the items that you are filling out first will then populate into some of the following sections. So specifically with this area, with the academics area, you'll notice that the first portion asks if you've taken any high school, college, or high school classes in 7th and 8th grade. So that's something that you could also input as well. But what is really critical is that you will need to make sure to, of course, input the high schools that you've attended first, to then be able to input your classes specifically. So you'll notice here, there's that edit button. When you're actually adding the high schools, you could, of course, add it. You can search and look up your high school. You'll need to fill out when you were at this high school. So in Melissa's case, who was my student here, or myself, I was at South Pasadena High School in 10th, 11th, and also 12th grade. So you'll need to make sure to select those and also populate the specific year that's associated with it as well, which again is really critical, especially as you navigate the application process. Something that I really want to highlight and point out too is you'll notice that under each grade, there is a comment that says, I took summer courses after this grade. Which I really want to make sure that you are paying attention to, because for the UC application, you're reporting summer grades after the year rather than before. So again, in the case you took summer courses, it is very important that you check mark that box. And as you scroll down, you'll be able to see too, there's some additional information regarding, of course, your grading policies, whether it's a semester school, if you're graduating from this high school, and so forth. So let's go ahead and click Save and Continue. In the case you attended any other high schools, which in my case I did, I attended somewhere else for 9th grade, you'll want to make sure to, of course, add that in as well, go through the same process. And once you're done, you can go ahead and hit the I finished adding high schools, which will then take you to be able to specifically add in your courses and grades for each and every single year. So something to note, let's go ahead and click on the edit button. So just something to pay attention to that I want to mention is with the UC application, if we take a look at the top there, there's specific codes that you'll want to pay attention to. Something to highlight here with the UC app is that schools will submit all their courses prior to UC application. And so in terms of what you are seeing populated here in this section is dependent on that. So again, the codes kind of help you notate, for example, if you are, taking an AP course, that is something that you'll want to highlight. HL or honors level courses, but something that I do want to note here is sometimes you might be taking an honors course that's designated by your high school on your transcript, but it might not populate into the application because of what your high schools have submitted in. And so in that case, don't worry about it. It's completely okay. As long as, of course, you've taken that course, that's completely fine. And so I just want to make sure to highlight, that is not necessarily something that you need to worry about specifically. So as we scroll through here with the academics section, something you'll notice is that you can choose the specific courses that you've taken through this automated population. With the UC application, they do not require you to input pluses and minus. So you'll notice here, you're just only able to select your grade level, so A, B, C, D, and E. And you really want to make sure that you're reflecting everything exactly how it is reflected on your transcript. Just because, again, in the case you do not accurately reflect everything here on the transcript, this could mean a couple of things. It might impact your admission regarding it being rescinded or be deemed as an incomplete application as well. So again, be really careful, especially as you're inputting this section, just because, again, you want to make sure to have your transcript as well as your application to be able to cross-reference back and forth. So again, pretty simple. You select the courses that you do. As we scroll through here, the next thing I want to highlight is in the case you don't see your courses, there is an option for you to select, I don't see my courses. What that then takes you to do is it allows you to input that course. By the specific area, the course name, which is how it's reflected on your transcripts, and then, of course, inputting your grades as you did in any other section as well. So, for example, I took AP US Government. It's not reflected there. I didn't see, so I'm going to go ahead and input it here into this section. And once I do that, click Save and Continue, and then it'll be able to move you forward as well. Something that I want to mention too, specifically with this section, if we can go back into the 2019-2020 academic year, let's say in the case you took a course for only one semester and not the second semester, what you would want to do is in that second semester for grade 2, you do have an option to put no as an NO. And what that will allow you to do is notate that you only took the course in first semester and not in second semester. And you could also reference this back to the code as well, which we were taking a look at earlier. That code is reflected right there. So again, no course taken this term is what you would want to notate here. In addition to that, you'll notice some additional codes. I know this is big, especially during COVID with like pass, no pass, credit, no credit. And so again, in case some of your grading policies change during COVID, there is a way to notate that here as well. Awesome. So this is the academic section. Again, it does require a lot of details and I think attention, especially as we move forward. Something I want to note too with this section, there is an additional comment section that can be used to also share anything that you haven't been able to elsewhere in the section. So in the case, as we go through and scroll through additional information right there, so in the case, like mentioned, if there are specific grading policies that change or there was maybe a gap or something that happened and you want to make sure to highlight that, this is the place to be able to do it. Also above, you'll notice that it says CASSID number, just so that way y'all are aware. This typically can be found on your high school transcript as well. So it's something to notate as you move through the application. In addition to that, something that I forgot to highlight with the academic section is that ninth grades are not calculated into your high school GPA as for the UC application. So even though it's not being calculated, something to be aware here is that the institutions that are reviewing your application can still see it, just because again through the inputting of your courses and grades through that process as well. Awesome. Something to note that I want to mention here with the academic information section is to clarify, in addition to some of the things that I mentioned, such as grading policy changes or break in attendance, you can also reflect here learning differences or major opportunities as well in the case you haven't been able to notate it anywhere else. So again, this is specific to the process. Oh, sorry. So this one is specifically for grading changes, but there is a second additional information section where you're able to highlight specific opportunities or learning differences elsewhere as well. So we'll go through that in just a second. But let's go ahead and scroll through. And so the next thing that I want to also highlight too, in addition to your high school coursework, if you did take any colleges or college courses, you would also be able to input that here. So kind of similar process to inputting your high school coursework. You could go ahead and add your colleges once you're done. I finish adding my colleges. And then at that point, it'll populate into the specific semesters that you took it at, where you'll be able to, of course, then input your courses from those respective institutions. And so something to note is, especially if you took like a summer program or just took colleges at a outside institution, this is where you'll want to go ahead and reflect it specifically in this section. Awesome. So let's go ahead and click continue. So again, that additional information section specifically to any changes regulating to academics. If we scroll through, this is going to be the academic section here still, but with the next section is going to be test scores. And so again, this is really not focused on admissions or scholarship purposes. It's really just for placement purposes. And so in the case you do wish to report SATs or APs or IBs, this would be the place to do it. If you would like to, you would just select yes. And then once you do, it gives you the chance to be able to move forward and, of course, navigate inputting those scores as well. So let's go ahead and move on to the next section. The bulk of my time that I want to spend today is going to really be the activity section. So if you can go ahead and click save and continue and go to activities. Awesome. So with the activity section, you have the space to be able to input 20 of your activities and awards. And so something to highlight, let's go ahead and try adding an activity. I do want to walk through some of the differences here with the options that you have when inputting activities into the UC application. So if we can go ahead and add an activity. Awesome. So with the UC application, something that is different than many other applications is that you are able to choose the category that you would like to add your activity in. And depending on the category that you choose, different prompting questions will come up. But more or less, I do want to mention, you have about 350 characters to really be able to show everything that you've done. So as an example, if we walk through the first category, extracurricular activity, you'll notice that, that one asks what you do. The awards allows you to kind of notate the awards and honors, the type of award, and also what you did to be able to achieve this award as well. And so you'll be able to, of course, kind of speak to that specifically. And also the eligibility requirements. And so again, a lot of space for you to elaborate there. Versus if we take a look at some of the other prompting questions, for example, volunteering and community service, you'll see here, this gives you the space to talk about the organization that you've worked with. And then also in addition to that, if we scroll down, it allows you to tell exactly what you did with this involvement as well. And so again, different prompting questions depending on what you would want to do. So as an example, I do want to add an activity with all of you today. And so if we can go ahead and choose extracurricular activities. The activities that I want to go ahead and add is going to be Future Business Leaders of America. So Future Business Leaders of America is something that I, was heavily involved in as a student that I'm working here. So some things to note, especially as you fill in the prompts of these questions is, it's not necessary to use complete sentences. You do have a lot of space and of course want to highlight and shine. But there's a lot of ways to kind of focus in on the different areas that you would want to recognize as well. Specifically here, you want to make sure that you're notating maybe any specific positions that you have or leadership opportunities to ensure that that is really shown through this application. And so, for example, for my students' case, I was the president and founder in 11th and 12th grade. And so again, I really want to make sure to reflect it there. And you want to use keywords and be specific to ensure that you're demonstrating everything that you've done. All of you have done a lot of things, especially in high school. I know, y'all are busy. And so it's really important for you to make sure to highlight, everything that you've done and really take time to reflect. And so right here, as you'll see, pitch club to school administrators virtually to establish first official chapter, advertise first recruitment campaign with 33% student to membership conversion, manage daily communications and social media platforms, lead competition training sessions, organize quarterly fundraisers such as blood drive and bake sales. And so again, really noting specific things that I've done within my involvement through this organization. And so I did this specifically in 11th and 12th grade, so I'll go ahead and mark those. And then when thinking about how much time you spend, the hours spent per week is a rough average. I know sometimes you'll have like the higher end and lower end, but in this case, I would say around 5 and also 30 weeks spent per year. And once you're done, you would want to go ahead and input, save, and continue. Specifically to the UC application, that I want to make sure to note is that once you've inputted your award or your extracurricular activity, it's not possible to move it around. So it is really critical for you to make sure that you are thinking about the ordering as you're navigating this application. And something that can be helpful as well as you're working through this application is making sure that you're keeping a Google document, and to be able to, of course, kind of transport and move some of those activities and awards around as well. Something else that I want to point out is in the case you add work experience, specifically, you would be able to, so if we can scroll down. So you'll notice that if you add work experience, there's that last question there in terms of how have you used or will you use your earnings. That doesn't automatically populate, it just shows there. So it is really critical if you are including work experience to make sure to edit that, because you will need to share, kind of how you're navigating that as well as part of the application. But really, this is, really a way for you to shine and showcase everything that you've done as a student. Even if you may think something is not important, it is, because it is something that you were involved in and took advantage of and committed your time to, especially as you navigated your time in high school. So again, it's really important to really highlight everything that you've done through this section.
Tina, you made a really good point about making a Google Doc. Would you be able to comment more on how to kind of select order? Because it's not always necessarily by the most recent, right? You want to kind of have like longevity and, importance. Like, what do you think are some factors in determining that order that can help students?
Of course. I think in terms of the Google Doc and reordering, I think, some of the things to consider is especially like leadership opportunities that you've done. If you've been engaged in something for like a very long period of time, it's something that you might want to highlight first because it's something that you've been committed to and have really put your time forth as well. And so again, I think kind of thinking and balancing out, of course, your leadership positions, involvement, as well as commitment is something that I would recommend, especially as you're navigating the reordering. And again, Google Docs, I think, is a great opportunity so that way you're still keeping the information that you've utilized and have, of course, put into the work, but being able to kind of shift that around as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, awesome. So once you're done, you could go ahead and click on I finished adding activities. And then it'll bring you back here. So as you scroll through, you'll see all of the activities that you have here. And so you'll be able to see everything populated in one place. And so, that's really helpful for you to kind of see all the hard work that you put in as well. If we move into the next section for continue to scholarships and programs, this again is another opportunity for you to be able to of course, get some more additional opportunities regarding scholarships and programs. And so if we scroll through, you'll see a bunch of lists of different academic interests and things like that as well. And so with that being said, if anything is applicable for you, you want to check it because this is an opportunity for free money. So really, my advice is don't let free money go to waste, right? It's a chance to get free money. So make sure you're going through this list and checking what you feel might be applicable for you specifically. Awesome. So let's go ahead and scroll through. Again, there's a ton of different things here. So a lot of information and things for you to kind of work with. But if we move through, let's go ahead and click continue. And once we're here, you'll see some other additional opportunity with the Educational Opportunity Program, which is another program that the UC offers. And if you're interested, there is some prompting questions that you'll need to do. But at this time, let's go ahead and move forward into our final section, which is going to be the PIQs. So with the personal insights, you have 8 questions to choose from. And so as you're navigating this, you do need to respond to 4 out of the 8. All questions really give equal consideration. So it doesn't matter which question you choose. You want to make sure to choose one that you feel is the most applicable and relevant to you. So whichever one you feel, you would be able to answer the most concise, and of course, you'll be able to put everything that you're interested in putting in there. So again, you can select 4 of them. Responses should be right around 250 to 350 words. And so something that I always recommend, so going back to Google Docs, again, I think Google Docs is great just because it gives you an opportunity to be able to still revise and to kind of work through before inputting it specifically into the application. And so, we would always recommend, of course, first drafting on a Google Doc first, just because there's going to take a lot of edits and revisions that will be happening, especially as you work through some of this. And you also want to make sure to have multiple eyes reading your statements as well, just because it's critical to, of course, get some feedback and, of course, really be able to, again, showcase you as a student and really show admission officers this versus tell them. And so, again, this is a great opportunity for you to work through and to continue shining and highlighting yourself as well. Awesome. And then going to the additional comment section. So this is what I had mentioned earlier. This specifically is where you would be able to highlight anything that you haven't been able to do on the application just yet. Again, this could be specific learning differences and things like that. And there's space for you to really be able to provide this, and the max is 550 words as well. So again, if there's anything else that you are missing or haven't had the chance to really showcase through the application, or just want to maybe put more time and energy into, this is the place to do it. The other section that we walked through earlier in the education will be more focused on academics specifically. So again, like I mentioned, just as a refresher, if there was different grading policy changes or things like that that you wanted to note, that would be the place to do it in the academic section. And this additional comment section is really for you if there's anything else that you haven't been able to showcase through the application. Awesome. So let's go ahead and click save and continue. And so as you walk through all the different portions, once you are ready, something that I want to note here is you'll notice that there's a check mark with each and every single section that's there that notes that you fully completed that section. As you work through the application, before submitting, I also recommend making sure to go through each and every single section and everything that you filled out to ensure it looks accurate. And one way to be able to do this easily, if you wanted to, is you could also do a print version, which allows you to see everything kind of in a full document view. So that way you can make sure to check your work to ensure that everything's accurately reflected. And so if everything looks good and you are ready to submit, what you could do too, or with this section I want to mention, you could also, if you wanted to, you can also print or save a PDF version just for your records. But if you're ready to submit, as you walk through and continue to browse through, you would just need to click on the review and submit button, which will then take you to a screen. If we can go ahead and exit out of this real quick. You'll notice there the start submission button at the bottom will allow you to start the review or submit process. Again, I'm not going to actually submit at this time, but it'll take you here. And once you review and submit, you start the process to then be able to pay for your applications and to really finalize the next steps with submitting your applications as well. And so as a refresher, as Sarah mentioned, you want to make sure you're giving yourself enough time. Do not wait until the very last day to submit, just because there can certainly be technological issues. So you want to make sure that you are giving yourself time and also grace to be able to walk through the entire application and take that time to really shine and showcase everything that you've done to the UC system specifically.
Awesome. Tina, thank you so much for all these useful tips and insight to the UC application. I think you really brought a lot of knowledge and things that are going to help these students with the upcoming cycle. So let's dive into some questions. We are going to try to get to as many as time allows. We are also going to have this available. The recording will be sent out to all attendees, so please feel free to reference back if you have any questions. And if you want to contact us directly, I'm going to provide a link in the chat, and you can feel free to reach out to us directly to help with any part of the process. So feel free to send any into the chat as far as questions or any feedback that you may have. I also wanted to I had a question that kind of came up. Something I kind of realized too as working with students is the discrepancy on course selection and making sure that you're putting the right thing as far as whether or not it's listed as an honors or if it provides the opportunity to code it as honors. So Tina, you were saying it's not really that big of an issue since that's something that's submitted by their school. So the UC system will have that understanding. But yeah, if you're able to clarify and say, what students should be mindful of when they're making that entry.
For sure, yeah. So again, as mentioned, as you work through the UC application, it is important to work through things chronologically. And so with that being said, once you enter your high school, it is pre-populating everything as we saw through the application. And so, with those codes, it is something that your high school specifically has submitted. So again, it is being pre-populated. So with that being said, you have the opportunity to be able to, of course, add the course, and then, of course, kind of navigate that as well. But again, everything is pre-populated into the application already, and so it's something that the high school specifically has been done.
Great. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I know that it's important just to trust that it's accurate and making sure that you're being as accurate on your end as possible, even if there is that discrepancy. So if it does happen, not to worry. Nothing's like fully infallible, but wanting to make sure that you're doing everything on your end.
As long as you're triple checking and taking, that time and energy to be able to put in that work, again, you should really just, of course, just trust that it's accurate and, of course, take that into account as well, especially as you move forward with the application.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I know we talked a little bit how course entry and your review of your A through G classes are going to be about kind of 50% of review, but is there any more insight of what UCs are looking for in the application process? I know that's kind of standardized, like gives the quantitative side, but do they hold different weight on different sections?
Yeah, so there's no specific breakdown. And again, with that being said, I think a big thing that the UCs are looking for, in my experience at least, outside of course, your academics, is really to be able to see the student for who they are, right? So being able to really see what they do outside of the classroom. And so again, going back to what I mentioned with the activities and awards, you have a ton of space to really highlight everything that you've done through, work experience, or, if you babysit your, siblings or take care of them. I know sometimes folks and people will think, that's not something that I've done outside of high school. Like that's just something that I do personally. But I mean, it's still something that you've been involved in, right? So I think it's really critical to make sure to note that and know everything that you've done, because again, it really allows us to see the leadership piece, or allows the UC systems to see the leadership piece. As well as, of course, your commitment to something that's really a big responsibility for you, right? And so I know that's something that is certainly being looked at within the application as well. And also, of course, being able to shine through to who you are as a student through the PIQs. Because, of course, your academics are just numbers, right? So it's just your numbers in terms of how you're doing and performing. But in addition to that, with that being said, I think the PIQs and the activities and awards gives you a lot of personality in that sense for us to really see everything that you've done outside of the classroom and who you might be as you contribute to the community at your respective institution.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that's just a testament to really identifying fit and really making sure that while you're identifying fit on your side and being really intentional, the UC schools are doing the same thing. So they're going to have those systems in place to make sure that they're finding the best candidates for their campus. We did have a question come through about late testing for the SAT and how that may impact the application review. So I know we talked a lot about it. It's going to be a test free, but is there any more insight you can offer about scholarship or course selection consideration? Are they able to submit it later?
Correct. Awesome. Yeah. So with the testing, again, I really want to emphasize that the UC process is test optional. So with that being said, when considering for the admission piece, of course, the testing is not going to be impacted at all, simply because, again, it's not something that's being considered through the process. Regarding, of course, the review for example, course placements and things like that, December test is also totally fine. You won't necessarily be able to submit December tests on your application. But when you do enroll, that's then at that point you would be able to, of course, work with your specific institution to then submit those scores in the case it is going to be utilized for placement specifically. And so, yeah, so that is, the biggest thing is that it's not going to impact your application is something that I really want to drive through. But thank you for the great question, Quiz. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think another question that came through is what if I don't know what to major in, is there a strategy to what I put, or can I just say undeclared? So
Yes. Sorry, go ahead,
go
Sarah.
ahead. No, I was just going to kind of say with there has been a lot more impaction this year. So again, it's important to do your research on your major. As Tina kind of mentioned earlier, you do have the alternative major to offer as undeclared if as your secondary major. So you do have that option, but it's again being mindful of what you're wanting to study. And if there is a specific option, you want to make sure that you're being as intentional in that review as well. But yeah, if there's anything else, Tina, that you can offer for declaration of majors.
For sure, yeah. So in terms of declaration of major, I think I really want to also emphasize what Sarah mentioned, of course, that you want to make sure you're doing your research. And I think a point that Sarah highlighted at the beginning of the presentation too was that, of course, for example, for some institutions, they are seeing students applying to only 12 majors, or most students applying to kind of those top 12 majors. But again, there are so many majors that are out there. So with that being said, it is really critical for you to make sure that you're doing your research to see what might be most applicable to you and what you might be most interested in. Certainly, of course, undeclared is an option, but keep in mind you also still have the first choice and second choice alternate major, as Sarah had mentioned. And so, really be able to, of course, reflect and also see what you feel would be the best fit for you, especially when considering things that you would want to study. Also, I do want to note too, with your secondary major, we do recommend also, or in our experience, we would recommend that it should be less selective than your first. And so again, you have the opportunity to be able to select the first and second choice as well. With the second choice too, you could also think of it like your backup in a way, because it is a second major that you're listing of your interest. And so I think there's a lot of different things you could kind of think through there, especially as you navigate the major selection. I do want to mention, I think earlier regarding the testing question, I think I mentioned that UCs are test optional. I do want to clarify that they are test free. Again, it's not something, as we mentioned, it's not something that is being reviewed at all within the application process, especially since admission advisors or admission counselors aren't able to see that information as well. Awesome. So with that being said, as a group that's really trying to reach as many families and students as we can to provide more information and better access to college, Sarah and I would just really like to take the time to thank you all for joining us for tonight and for also sharing this webinar with your friends. We know that applying is always so much more work than any student thinks, and it will be when they come to the table. And so we just are so grateful to all of you who are sharing the space with us tonight and taking the time to soak up all this information, especially about the UC application, which again, can be a very beastly application. I also want to give a big shout out to Sarah. Thank you so much for her, insights, her expertise, and just her assistance and support for this process as well. For those of you who are joining us, if you feel you might need more information, we're looking to our next workshop. That's your Jumpstart on November 6th. And so we hope you all have a good night and take care.
Thanks all.